And on today's topic, we're discussing Dushane, the main character of Top Boy, or at least the Deuteronomy along with Sully. And in the last video, we talked about the psychology of Sully, but in this video, we're going to dive deep into the rise and fall of Dushane Hill. How he rose to be Top Boy and ultimately lost it all because of his own actions, the actions of his friends and family, as well as his own psychology. Because despite being a hardened criminal, Dushane is not a bad guy. Dushane's motivations, Dushane's characteristics, what Dushane is trying to achieve is somewhat altruistic, but that also is the reason why ultimately everything blew up in his face, because he tried to take on too much. And in that final season of Top Boy, we see Dushane acting uncharacteristically and making a whole bunch of mistakes because ultimately Dushane's character, his shell has been cracked. Dushane's outer exterior is cracked and he was unraveling before our very eyes. We began with Dushane's story. We saw him as a bright-eyed, eager young man of 26 years old in Top Boy Summer House. But by the time Top Boy ends, Dushane is 36, 37 years old. Life has beaten him down. Everything he's worked for crumbled in front of him and he lost it. No longer was he careful. No longer was he meticulous. No longer was he a power player. Dushane was broken in the end, and ultimately, because of the fracture with his relationship with Sully, led to his demise. But let's dive deeper. We start off with Dushane's story when he's 26 years old, living in Summer House along with Sully and Drist. And at that time, they're low-level drug dealers. They're runners, essentially. Because in the first season, when they get robbed by Kamali, they don't even have $3,000 to pay off their bosses, because at the time, Dushane was not Top Boy. Him and Sully were basic runners, but they had dreams and aspirations. Dushane always wanted more, and that's why he circumvented Lee and using his connections with Rake, as well as by first getting rid of Lee and handling the whole Rakes and Kamali situation. But as Dushane's rise continued happening, the mystique and aura around Dushane started spreading around. Everyone in Summer House knew who he was. Even little Michael, creating stories about how many people Dushane has killed already. At this point, Dushane hasn't killed anybody, but his mystique, his aura, and just when people talk to Dushane, the way he comes off, he's more calm than Sully. He's willing to listen, he's negotiating, he looks out for the people of Summer House. That allowed him to rise to the top, getting rid of Lee, getting rid of Rakes, framing them, showing Joe that he was able to take on more work, and Dushane became Top Boy. It cost him his relationship with Sully ultimately, because in season 2 we know the falling out they had over Mike, but again, Dushane achieved Top Boy status, and he was Top Boy for a few years, because the gap between season 1 and season 2 of Summer House is a few years. Michael's grown up, Jim has grown up, Renee has grown up, and you can see Dushane has been running things for a while. He has a new apartment, so now he's on top of his game. But it's at that moment that we start to see the cracks in Dushane's psychology, because Dushane's motivations were simple. Dushane came from nothing in Summer House, and Dushane wanted to help out people. And it's when Dushane reaches that peak, when he's Top Boy in those few years, Dushane starts to unravel, and we start to dive deeper into his issues, because ultimately Dushane has two very distinct psychological patterns that we see from him. One, Dushane is a people pleaser, and two, he has a savior complex. Dushane, throughout of Top Boy, all Dushane has mostly tried to do while trying to get himself to a higher position, raise his esteem, because people pleasing, when you have people pleasing tendencies, that comes from a place of low self-esteem. And while Dushane has the bravado, we see this in regular Top Boy, he wants someone to hang out with. He even invites Renell's mom to sit down with him, because ultimately he feels like no one understands what he's trying to do, and he's trying to help everybody. And that's where Dushane has his biggest issues, because Dushane's people-pleasing tendencies, he doesn't take decisive action. He waits to the last minute. He's not as decisive and hardcore as Sully, and that's why Dushane gets in a lot of trouble, because Dushane is willing to work with his enemies. Dushane is willing to help his enemies, friends or foe, family, to his own detriment. Most of that can be seen in his relationship with Sully. But not just Sully. In the early seasons of Summer House, Dushane did not want to kill Kamali, and because they didn't kill Kamali, like Sully said, they got robbed yet again, and ultimately they had to do it. But Dushane doesn't like the violent side of that. He doesn't like the violence of the lifestyle. Ultimately, Dushane does not want to be in the lifestyle. He's always used it as a means to an end. He wants to provide for his family. He wants to provide for his friends. He wants to provide for his neighborhood. He wants to help people. He wants people to like him. They have the respect. He has their respect because he helps out. He looks out. They can come to him. Even former enemies can turn to Dushane, ask him for help, and he's willing to compromise other relationships as long as it helps whoever he needs to help at the situation. Dushane gets these tunnel vision goggles when it's time to help somebody, and ultimately it seems though he's selfish. It comes off as he's selfish because he's acquiring money, but in Dushane's mind, because of where he grew up in Summer House and how his life was, money was the ultimate key to getting what you want. Everyone's problems around him were money. Everyone in Summer House for the most part were poor, and money could help them all out. So that's why even the youngers recruiting young children to sling drugs, Dushane did it because he's putting money in their pocket. He feels like he's helping them. Their fathers aren't around, so here, become the man of the house, like he felt like he had to become. And that is a clash that he and his brother have, because his brother feels as though it's not gonna happen. Dushane, this lifestyle will cause you to eat yourself ultimately, but he doesn't see that because of where he comes from now. When he has money, he's able to move, have a nicer house. White people are respecting him. He goes to banks, talks to lawyers however he wants. Everyone sees him for how smart he is, and that's why Dushane ultimately feels the need to keep doing it. And no matter what he wants to get out of, whether it's the drug game or any situation he's in, if someone needs help and they come to him and Dushane likes you and wants to help you and wants you to like him, he's going to sacrifice everything he built in order to help that person, in order to people please. He wants his enemies to like him. He wants his friends to like him. That's why he overextends, and that's what causes some of his relationships to get strained, because when he has a good relationship with one person, he'll jeopardize that dynamic to have a good one with somebody else and feels as though because he's himself, he can fix everything. So Dushane has a problem where he wants to help everybody. He wants to fix everything. He's taken on the whole burden of everything on his own shoulders. And we see that begin to manifest with his heart problems, because that's a lot of stress to put on yourself. And we saw throughout Top Boy, Dushane started getting heart issues and Dushane started unraveling and acting uncharacteristically. And even with the whole situation with Jeffrey and acting out of character, because $15 million, everything he's worked for. He was trying to change his life, his family's generations worth of wealth, gone. He snapped. And thus begins the eventual downfall of Dushane's empire. Because Dushane doesn't even delegate correctly when it comes time to it. And that causes a rift in most of his relationships, especially with Sully and with Driss. Because Dushane wants to carry everything on his own back. He doesn't feel as though the people around him carry their own weight. He lets them know that, but he's also caring enough to go above and beyond for them. But because of this need to be a savior, this big brother complex, that causes the biggest rift that ultimately causes him his life, and that is with Sully. Because Sully was his best friend, his A1 day one, but Dushane started seeing how Sully's behavior, Sully's psychology played a factor to Sully being unstable, and Dushane doesn't have the capacity to meet Sully where he's at. So he feels like he's just going to delegate to Sully and send Sully in the corner somewhere and take on Sully's burdens on himself. But that's never what Sully wanted, see me as an equal. Because Sully knows Dushane is smarter than him. Sully realized that. He's come to Dushane time and time again when he's in a rut and they need to get out of it. So he understands that. He gives Dushane that respect. But Dushane, because no malicious intent at all. It's not because he thinks that anyone is less than, but because he feels like Sully's his friend, he can help Sully. Sully doesn't know what he's doing, so he's going to take that and relegate him to a certain standard. That causes a rift. Then you have his dynamic with Driss, never allowing Driss, because Driss is a hothead, so never allowing Driss to have too much power, seeing that Jack was more level-headed than Driss, so therefore he promoted Jack over Driss, even though him and Driss have been friends since they were kids along with Sully, because ultimately it was for the well-being of Driss. Driss was sick. Driss needed to spend more time with his daughter. Driss was having seizures. But again, Dushane took that upon himself. When it came to Shelly and her situation, everyone's burden Dushane takes onto himself. Jamie, getting Jamie in trouble in and out of jail. Showing that ultimately Dushane probably has a savior complex. But not just that, borderline God complex, because a savior complex is nothing more but a dialed down God complex ultimately, because you think you can save everyone and you're human just like everybody else. When it came to his cousin Donovan, Dushane got him in that mess and got Donovan killed, but he tried to provide a better life. That's why he went to go rob the person in the first place. And even in that robbery, killing Lester to save that old lady began his downfall, started sending him back in the game. Burning bridges to save potential other bridges. Prime example, his cousin got killed, Donovan, because of that. His brother got an iron to the chest because of that. His mother ultimately died of stress because of the summer house development where he was trying to provide her a better life, a better apartment. He started pushing people away that he wanted to help because he was pulling on too tight, holding the reins on too tight, and his empire began to crumble. He didn't have anyone he could fully trust because he didn't feel like they knew what they were doing. So he started holding everything close to the vest. And when you do that, you either popped or get popped. And ultimately, when he needed someone to help him, no one was there. Shelly, who was supposed to be there for him, he never allowed her any closer than she needed to be, so she didn't know why he was behaving the way he was. But he was mad at her and spazzing because it wasn't about Shelly. It was about the fact that he himself had failed to help her, and that reflected negatively on him. So he pushed everyone he had away, and that causes trust issues with people around you. That causes you to get betrayed. People don't want to work with you anymore. People don't really like you. People don't see a way out or see a way with you forward, so everyone betrays you. Life. Dushane saw consequences as nothing. He didn't believe in the long run consequences of pushing Sully away, pulling him, playing with Jamie, playing with the legal system. Dushane thought he was untouchable. At this point, he might as well have been, because Dushane has faced death time and time and time again, losing it, snapping and killing Jeffrey the way he did, and doing the bare minimum work he did to clean up the scene was, again, him not looking deeper into the consequences. And at this point, he's unraveling to the point where he doesn't have anyone to turn to, but he never thought he could get got. Ultimately, even when he stole Sully's drugs and ran, and he didn't think Sully was going to shoot him, he doesn't feel like the consequences apply to him because of, again, the God complex that Dushane has. What we can learn from Dushane is, even though you have good intentions, trying to keep someone close by holding on too tight can have the adverse effect that you're looking for. And it's not good for you, it's not good for the individual, and ultimately you're doing yourself a disservice. And no matter how many riches you amass, no matter how many resources you get, no matter how many friends you have, you will ultimately lose everything if you hold on too tight, because that shows an inflexibility, and anything that's inflexible will break. So sometimes it's okay to look around and ask for help. It's okay to lean on the people you want to help, because our relationships should be reciprocal and not one-sided. But guys, that's just my thoughts on the rise and fall of Dushane. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And guys, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, binge on.